So again, we are very excited to have Heidi Thomas today and present a special session with Advent music. And again, remind you that the session is being recorded. So Heidi, it's all yours.
Wonderful. I'm going to start with a plug today. The reason Rush was gracious and I basically asked to see if he felt we could not do Adult Forum next week, and here's why. It is Advent, and even with the pandemic, we have a plethora of options, and I am bringing your attention to tonight's, can you all see that? A First Plymouth Christmas Carol card, I would say. And it's a sing-along, and it's, you know, get your cocoa and sit in front of your computer. But there's a lot of music available and a lot of options at this time of year, even though we're not live. And so today, I'm going to look at today as kind of a warm-up for tonight for you all. So don't forget, 7 o'clock tonight, that's going to be wonderful. I am going to have Rush, I'm just wanting you to know that throughout this, I am okay if people want to ask questions or add information today. I would really love this to be interactive. I realize that if my mic is mostly the one on, then it won't cut in and out. So I'm going to give opportunities throughout here to ask questions or throw in comments. And I would love it if you would turn your mics on. And let's try to make this more interactive, all right? Second thing, I got feedback. People said, you know, it's nice to see your face, which was true. It's great to see everybody's faces, but they wanted to see me playing. I don't know if you thought that was recorded with all those mistakes, but no, it wasn't recorded. I'm really playing. So we're going to start off today, and you're going to see that this is just a kind of sort of a hymn sing, sort of. I hope if you know the words, you will feel free to sing at home. You've already, most of you, attended the Breathing is Good for You, especially if you're not in a crowded room right now. So I would encourage you to grab your water or your coffee. I have my Noel Peace mug. And let's just, you know, kind of learn and sing together. Traditionally, the third Sunday in Advent, when you light the candle, they talk about joy. And I've always had kind of a funky thing with that, because to me, Advent was this kind of quiet, introverted or internalized anticipation, waiting period, kind of the darkness before the dawn. And I thought, they're getting the cart before the horse here. We don't have joy yet. Joy comes on Christmas, right? And I've thought that since I was little. So I took this opportunity today to do a little homework of my own, and I'm going to share my homework with you. That's basically what we're doing today. If you think about the word joy, I started kind of playing Where's Waldo, or, you know, I Spy, and trying to find Advent hymns, not Christmas hymns, Advent hymns that have the word joy in them. And I was surprised that it's there a lot. Joy or rejoice, which of course is the verb sound, is feel or show great joy or delight. That's rejoice. So there you go. Joy or rejoice. And I was, as I said, pleasantly surprised. So I think we can all use a little joyful anticipation, especially this year. I would like you, if you can, I invite you to connect with your inner kid and the anticipation you used to feel at Christmas time. That's the kind of joy we're talking about. And sometimes in these hymns, it's very bombastic, and sometimes it's a quiet joy. It's a quiet rejoicing. It's that excitement joy. Christmas is coming. The darkness is going to be over. Ah! And for us these days, I think that's a very relevant message. So, you can sing along. I will be reading some lyrics. Some of them you will know, some of you won't. If you want to hum, you know what I think of humming. Humming is good. Humming is great. I'm going to do something silly. And whenever the word joy or rejoice is in the lyrics, I'm going to shout it. And I would invite you, if you know it's coming, to do the same. It's kind of fun. So the very first one we're going to start with is kind of the quintessential Advent hymn, O come, Emmanuel. It's quiet, it's introspective, it sounds kind of spooky, it's in a minor key, but rejoice is repeated in the chorus. It's not just said once, it's repeated. I looked this up. The original chant dates back to the medieval monasteries, and they had one verse for every day leading up in the week before Christmas. They had a different verse. And so once somebody somewhere in the 1800s decided it was a gorgeous melody, they wanted to make it a hymn that everybody sang. They added the chorus that we all know, rejoice, rejoice. Emmanuel shall come to you, O Israel. That wasn't added until in the 1800s, churches made it into a hymn. So we're just going to sing, O come, Emmanuel. You'll have to listen to me unless you turn your mic on, which would be fine. All right? O come, Emmanuel, and ransom captive Israel, that mourns in lonely exile here, until the Son of God appear. Here we go. Rejoice, rejoice, Emmanuel shall come to you, who is Israel. Now, not nearly as familiar, there is a hymn called With Joy Draw Water. The tune is an old Irish traditional tune. I don't know if Noni's on here, but she will love that. But these lyrics were just written in 1986, really recently, by Anne McKinstry, who was a writer in residence at Otis UCC in Massachusetts. I think that's amazing. They have a writer in residence at Otis UCC. That's incredible. So I want to read these lyrics to you just because it isn't a familiar hymn. It says, with joy, draw water from the spring, salvation's living well. The Holy One is in your midst. Glad praises sing and tell. Obviously, we all now know who the living well is. Sounds like this. Old Irish tune. With joy, or I should do this again. With joy, draw water from the well. Salvation's living well. The Holy One is in your midst. That praises sing and tell. Then they repeat that same verse at the end. And to me, again, that sounded more like a Christmas hymn because it says, the Holy One is in your midst, not will be. But the other verses, and there are several, so I'm not going to go through those. The other verses make it clear that this is what will happen. The wolf will lie down with the lamb, and there will be peace on earth. And we're still waiting for that, aren't we? Anybody know that hymn? If you do, pop your mic on. That one's new to me, and I've been doing this a while. The lyrics of We Hail You, God's Anointed, are actually based on Psalm 72. And they were written as a Christmas hymn for a Moravian settlement in Yorkshire, England in the 1800s. This was one of the very earliest hymns that hymnologists, and yes, there are, and musicologists, there are hymnologists. This is one of the earliest hymns where the lyrics speak to social justice that they've found. They add the promise that Christ would bring freedom from oppression, equality in law, other things that now, especially we UCCers, consider standard hymn, but at the time, this was pretty radical. And once again, I'm going to read you a couple of verses here. We hail you, God's anointed, the long-awaited one. Wait a minute, do I have the right one? Wrong. I'm on the wrong verse. He shall come down like showers upon the fruitful earth. Love, joy, and hope like flowers spring his path to birth. Before him on the mountains shall peace, the herald, go, and righteousness in fountains from hill to valley flow. Those are the old words. The UCC, when they did the New Century Hymnal, as we know, they changed a lot of the lyrics. The tune is one that everybody's going to know, right? We know it is Hosanna, loud Hosanna. It's a Palm Sunday, right? But they set these lyrics to this very familiar tune so that when the early, as I said, the Moravian settlement would know the tune and all they had to do was learn the words. So I'm going to do my best to sing the third verse from here, which are the original words, while I'm reading the music from here, so be patient. He shall come down like flowers upon the fruited earth. Love, joy, and help like flowers spring in his path to birth. Before him on the mountains shall peace the herald go, and righteousness in fountains from hill and valley flow. I think it's interesting that an Advent hymn was written with social justice words, based on the excitement and the joy of freedom from oppression. I think that's kind of cool. In 1825, John Bowring, who was a member of British Parliament and the governor of Hong Kong, wrote the lyrics to Watcher, Tell Us of the Night. Remember that old tune? They are a dialogue between a traveler and the watcher, kind of like the gatekeeper, the one who keeps the town safe. And they're based on some writings from Isaiah 21. So again, I'm going to read this very first verse. Watcher, tell us of the night, what its signs of promise are. Traveler, a wondrous sight. See that glorious beaming star. Watcher, does its beauteous ray news of joy, hope foretell? Traveler, yes, it brings the day promised of Israel. So these two have this discussion. The traveler is asking if it's going to be a good day. The watcher is saying, can you see that star? Absolutely. It is going to be a beautiful, joyous day. Watcher, tell us of the night. Watcher, tell us of the night, what its signs of promise Traveler, a wondrous sight. See the glorious beaming star. Watcher, does its beauteous ray news of joy or hope foretell? Traveler, yes, it brings the day, promised day of Israel. Anybody else, back when we were all in church together, sing the hymns and frankly, just kind of sing the words and not really think about what they mean? I did. I confess it. I can tell you, especially people in choir, often we are very focused on everybody singing the right part. And sometimes the words just kind of are incidentals. Shame on us. Somebody spent a lot of time and creativity and probably divine inspiration writing these down. I never knew that that was based on the Isaiah discussion. Learn new things every day.
So Heidi,
yeah.
I will just interject. I guess maybe a lot of you know that at this time, the Saturn and Jupiter are appearing closer and closer together. There's going to be this conjunction, and I think it's going to be kind of optimal on December 21st. And they said they may even appear as a single bright planet, and this happens only every several hundred years. And he said it did happen around 4 BC, and they think it may have been what the Star of Bethlehem was. So
I saw that too. Anybody else see that? Yeah? I love that stuff. I love when science and faith come together and it's like, yeah, see?
Can I share a little something? Several years ago, First Plymouth put together a book of Advent readings and asked different members to write something. And I wrote a little essay on joy. And I started it with a quote from Mother Teresa. And I found that something attributed to her said that joy was the pivot of her being. And that's just such a wonderful thing to think about. And of course, when I heard the word pivot, I could think about the big irrigation pivots back on the farms in Nebraska, which spread nutrition to the growing crops. And so joy, as the pivot of our being, can have a very wide influence if we can feel that joy and share it with others. And so that's my little, I don't have a voice. I can't sing anymore, but I could tell you that story.
I love that story. And Ruth, I think I remember reading your essay. I think I remember.
Thank you.
If I wanted to turn this camera around, by the way, welcome to my music room. Right over there, it has a little doodle that says, if you can walk, you can dance. If you can talk, you can
sing. Okay.
I don't want to
I'll try to work on that.
Garbage anymore. No excuse. And actually, while I'm on that, I'm gonna tangent here for a second, Ruth, because I find it's a perfect time of year. That's a great thing. And although it sounds like I'm admonishing you, I'm not. I really want to make sure everybody knows this, but I'm going to tell my own little story about singing. When our oldest daughter was a baby, an infant, 6 months old, on Christmas Day, actually, Dave and I took her up to Washington State, where her grandmother and all of Dave's family were, to meet the family. That was her first trip. Morgan had colic. So she was the classic, everything is fine until about 4:30 in the afternoon, and then we got nothing until maybe 1 or 2 in the morning. It was
yeah. My daughter was that way.
Yeah, and it's just heartbreaking, right? But now I'm in this tiny little town in Linden, Washington, which, by the way, is where Joel Rinsema is from. How cool.
Oh my gosh.
No, I know, tiny little town. And we have Morgan asleep. Dave's mom, no surprise to anybody, was the organist and choir director at this church in Linden. And that meant on Christmas Eve, whether her children, adult children, wanted to or not, they would be in the choir on Christmas Eve. So Dave and his siblings were up in the choir. I found a seat in the next to the back pew of this tiny little creaky church with creaky little wooden pews. It was classic. I loved it. And Morgan was asleep. Ah! All right, now we've gotten through almost the entire service, and I know we're all going to stand up and sing Silent Night, and then she's going to wake up and she's going to scream, and I'm thinking, what can I do to keep this child asleep? So I had her wrapped up. I had my hand over the blanket over her ear. Behind me, a little man who was probably about as old as those pews creaked to his feet, and you could hear him. He was pushing on the pew to get to his feet, and then he started singing Silent Night. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, the melody that his voice was singing was nothing close to what you and I would say is Silent Night. It was the most heartfelt, beautiful. He was singing with his soul. And yes, I'm a musician, and I absolutely fell apart. I was in tears. This man was such a minister to me because he was singing from his soul. I couldn't care less what the melody sounded like. So that's my story to you this Christmas. Please use your voices. Please sing from your soul. We don't care. Okay, enough. Anybody else have a little tangential story now that we've got the ball rolling here? Thank you, Ruth. Anyone else? Shall I keep rolling? Okay. The next one I've got is comparatively new. It was only written in 1983 by Marty Haugen, and those of you who are in the choir will know that name. He is a prolific Christian, especially choral music writer, and it's Awake, Awake, and Greet the New Morn. Again, I thought, why is this an Advent hymn? Because to me, that sounds very Christmas-like. I just thought that it was interesting. It was written by Marty because he was following many of the passages in Isaiah telling about the Christmas story. So it is Advent because he's telling the story, I guess. And then when I read these verses to you, I think you'll see. So the first verse says, Awake, awake, and greet the new morn, for angels herald its dawning. Sing out your, everybody say it, joy! For Jesus is born. Behold, the child of our longing. Come as a baby, weak and poor, to bring all hearts together, to open wide the heavenly door, and lives now inside us forever. That's verse 1. So I'm going, again, isn't that a Christmas hymn? Here's verse 4. Rejoice! Repeat it. Rejoice! Take heart in the night. Though cold the winter and cheerless, the rising sun shall crown you with light. Be strong and loving and fearless. Love be our song, and love our prayer, and love our endless story. God, fill every day we share and bring it last into glory. So basically, it's an encouragement. We're going to get through this dark time. It is going to be okay. Again, how perfect is this for us right now? So it sounds like this. I'm only going to do verse 4, by the way. Rejoice, rejoice, take heart in the night. sun shall crown you with light. Be strong and loving and fearless. Love be our song and love our prayer and love our endless story. May God fill every day we share and bring us at last into glory. The next one really isn't a hymn, but many of you are going to know it. It's on all these great choral Christmas albums. You've heard it for years. How Great Our Joy. It's become, as I said, more of a choral piece, but it was, I want to make sure I'm doing this right. Yeah. It was written to the tune of a German carol. And the words joy, joy, joy are all the way through this. So if you want to, because you're going to know this, again, I encourage you, feel free to turn on your mics. We'll hear various people saying joy, and I think that would be kind of cool. The words are, while by the sheep we watched at night, glad tidings brought one angel bright. How great our joy! And then remember, there's a little echo. Great our joy. Joy, joy, joy. Remember this? Joy, joy, joy.
Joy, joy. Uh-huh.
Praise we the Lord in heaven on high. Praise we the Lord in heaven on high. Which is kind of why it's become this great choir piece, because they typically put one choir over here and a little echo choir of angels over here. I did it in a church one time, and we just split the congregation. So we had one side sing the first part, and then the other side sing the second part. So if you want to do that, you can do that too, all right? Verse 4, this gift of God will cherish well, that ever joy our hearts shall fill. How great our joy. Then we go back to the thing. Okay, so feel free to be an echoer or a real with me, whatever. Sorry. This gift of God will cherish well, that ever joy hearts shall fill. Oh, great our joy, great our joy, 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 the Lord in heaven high, praise we the Lord in heaven. All right, I'm going to give you a break because I didn't think we could possibly do anything about joy without including Jesu, joy of man's desiring.
Oh, wow.
As you know, this was written by J.S. Bach. And right there in the title, you've got the word
Joy.
thank you. Love that participation. Here are the translated words, because obviously he wrote in German, but the rough translation is Jesu, joy of man's desiring, holy wisdom, love most bright. Drawn by thee, our souls aspiring, soar to uncreated light. Verse 3 says, through the way where hope is guiding, hark, what peaceful music rings, where the flock in thee confiding drink of joy from endless springs. Verse 4. Theirs is, and by theirs they're talking about those of us who are believers. Theirs is beauty, beauty's fairest pleasure. Theirs is wisdom's holiest treasure. Thou dost ever lead thine own in the love of joy unknown. So now you can just sit and drink your coffee, close your eyes, because I am not going to try to sing while we play this. I'm just curious. Has anybody else heard the other lyrics to Jesu Joy? I don't know that I'd ever heard some of those verses. Anybody else? I see shaking heads, but I can't see all of you, so. Anybody? Mic on, if you've heard some of those other verses, or maybe you learned them in German and I'm not that educated. No? All right. I'm using that as my bridge because now we're going to talk about Christmas and that kind of joy. But I think you're going to sense a different joy. This was all the anticipatory joy. This was the joy of we're getting there, folks. It's close. It's close. Now we're going to talk about it's here. The earliest Latin texts of Adeste Fideles, O Come All Ye Faithful, were found in the manuscripts of John Francis Wade, who lived, he was one of the British Catholic exiles, and they lived in France. So when you're thinking of the joy that you hear in, right, that tune, it's very exciting. Think of that. He wrote that when he was living in abject poverty as a refugee, essentially. And these words, the fact that he was able to practice his faith, he didn't care about the poverty. He was able to practice his faith and come up with this amazingly joyful tune. And so the second verse says, "O come all ye faithful," sorry, the first verse, "O come all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant, O come ye to Bethlehem." Now you guys know this one. I just wanted to point out the joyful. So everybody, we're going to sing this one together. And then there's "Good Christian Men Rejoice," which again, the New Century hymnal changed to "All Christian Friends Rejoice." I get it. I appreciate that they allow the women into it. I get it, but I'm sorry. It will always be "Good Christian Men Rejoice" to me. It dates back to, are you ready for this? The early 14th century. I don't think this sounds that old, but that's where it comes from. And it was a German mystic named Heinrich Suso, I assume it's Suso, told of a vision he had had in which angels who were singing this carol drew him into a dance. And then his original lyrics included both his native German and Latin. But as you know, "Good Christian Men Rejoice" is the start of every single of the three verses. We're just going to sing that first one, and I bet you guys know the words. But as you listen now, picture the fact that he had listened to this in a dream, in a vision, and it was a dance, which was very scandalous for the 14th century. To combine a Christmas thing with a dance, oh, scandal. Sounds like a dance, right? Good Christian men rejoice with heart and soul and voice. Give heed to what we say. News, news, Jesus Christ is born today. Even though you may not know it, it has joy in it. Good Christian men rejoice with heart and soul and voice. Now ye hear of endless bliss. Get ready. Joy, joy. Jesus Christ was born for this. He hath opened heaven's door, and man is blessed evermore. Christ was born for this. Christ was born for this. Really joyful, terribly scandalous. Woo! All right, then we're going to go from the sublime, dancing scandalous to the ridiculous, Martin Luther. So we've had a UCC writer in residence. We have had J.S. Bach. Now we're on to basically the founder of the Lutheran denomination. From heaven unto earth I come. And he wrote this, I think this is kind of cool, for his family's Christmas Eve celebration. And that was in 1534. Again, this sounds very chant-like, so I can see that. That makes sense to me. The tune, though, was familiar to the kids because it was a singing game song. And then he simply spread it out and added verses and then published it about a year later. So this started out as a tune that the kids would know because it was a singing game song. And then he wrote the lyrics. Now I'm going to read verse 4 specifically. My heart for very joy now leaps. My voice no longer silence keeps. I too must join the angel throng to sing this joyous cradle song. There's a second verse. To you this night is born a child of Mary, chosen mother mild. This little child in Joseph's arms with joy shall conquer all earth's harms. The very first verse you might know. From heaven unto earth I come to bear good news to everyone. Glad tidings of great joy I bring, whereof I now will gladly sing. So he actually says it in 3 different verses. He uses the word joy. But I'm just going to sing the first one. And if you know it, yeah, sing along. And if you don't, hum. You can only yell joy. From heaven unto earth I come to bear good news to everyone. That tidings of great joy I bring, whereof I now will gladly sing. Sounds a lot like the doxology to me, so I'm guessing they all had roots somewhere right in there. On Christmas night, all Christians sing. It's based on an old medieval carol, but during the Puritan era in England, all those carols were basically banned. So they became kind of underground because they were considered blasphemous. So they started being rediscovered in the late 1800s and even the 19th century. Ralph Vaughan Williams discovered this tune, this hymn, actually in the early 20th century, in the early 1900s. On Christmas night, all Christians sing to hear the news the angels bring. On Christmas night, all Christians sing to hear the news the angels bring. News of great
joy.
News of great mirth. News of our gracious ruler's birth. So again, you can sing, you can just yell joy when we get to that part. That's right. On Christmas night, all Christians sing to hear the news. On And I'm looking at the time, and we are at an hour. So I'm going to jump. I've got a few more, but we're going to jump to the end. If I said we were singing Advent and Christmas songs based on joy, what is the very first one you all thought of? Mic's on.
Joy to the world.
Bingo! I thought we'd finish with that one. All right. Joy to the world, you know the first one, first verse, and I'm actually going to do the second verse as well. If you know it, great, but you'll see that joy is actually mentioned 3 times in the second verse. So everybody knows the first verse. If you know the second verse, great. Otherwise, I'm going to look at you and you all yell joy when we get there, okay? Here we go. Sing with joy.
And heaven and nature, heaven and nature,
Starts joy to the earth, the Savior reigns. Here we go.
the earth, the Savior reigns. And fathers, repeat the sounding joy.
Yay! I am hoping that everybody will go off following today with that anticipatory joy of Advent, especially this year, especially with this pandemic, especially with all of the unrest and the fighting and the divisiveness. And think about the joy of the early Christians and us today. It's going to be over soon. The joy of Christmas is right around the corner. So, as I said, tap into your inner child and get that feeling of joy, that feeling of anticipation. I think that's really important for us to maintain hope and peace, is to have that anticipatory joy. So I wish you joy for the rest of your week until next Sunday.